Today, we're sitting down with Weldon Angelos. He's a Utah native, and he was arrested back in 2002 for cannabis and gun charges, and he's sentenced to 55 years and 1 day in prison. He was released back in 2016, and he's doing a lot to help what we're calling the POWs, prisoners of weed, that are behind bars right now to get out. So welcome, Angelos. Thank you for being on the show and our first edition, and
thanks for having me.
Great person to come talk to the Utah green scene. Since many of our younger green scene audience have never heard your name or your story, can we just dive into that?
Yeah, so in 2002, I had a successful music career. I was working with people like Snoop Dogg, and I had sort of gotten the attention of the local law enforcement in Utah. I'd recorded a number of songs with Snoop, made a video about songs about smoking weed, and in the video we were on tour smoking weed everywhere, and some of that footage got leaked out by this informant, I believe, and the federal and local law enforcement launched an investigation into me. At the same time, this confidential informant, some guy I knew when I was 15 years old, had gotten out of prison. He was a violent drug offender. He had went in for cocaine distribution. He had gotten out. He immediately caught an armed meth trafficking case, and he was facing 20 years or more. And he immediately began expressing an interest to cooperate. He then was referred to the Salt Lake Metro Gang Unit to work off his charges. And he sat down for a debriefing, and he said that he could, set up some Mexican cartel members. He could give them information on a murder. And they were like, no, we want Weldon Angelos. And he was like, okay. We find out later he was a little confused of why they wanted me, but he's like, okay, I think I could help with that. And they, set up some marijuana buys for just small amounts, $300. Because I wasn't really, at the time, my career was doing really good. And this guy was someone, the cover story was that he just got out of prison. He was broke. He had a new kid. He needed money to get on his feet. So he asked for some help, basically appealing to my sympathy. And so I engaged in 3 hand-to-hand sales. Here you go, $300 was it. I stopped dealing with him after that. He started asking for guns and cocaine, everything else. I said, no, I don't do that. I'm in the music. I was just trying to help you. Stop calling me. And 6 months later, after they failed to get any more, drugs or anything from me, they concluded their use of this informant. They referred him to the federal prosecutors for immunity. And they turned over the case file with just 3 marijuana sales and nothing else. And this guy's facing a lot of time. And so the only thing in these police reports were marijuana sales. Well, 2 weeks after they turned the case over to the feds, they went back to the original informant handler and asked them to re-debrief the informant. This time, the informant starts remembering all kinds of different facts, like, oh, there was a firearm in the vicinity of each one. Oh, it was this, that. And then therefore now I'm facing, firearm enhancements. Even though I was a legal gun owner, I'd never been to prison. I wasn't a felon. I had a permit. And so I went to trial. I was facing 105 years at trial, and I beat half the charges. I lost the other half, ended up with 55 years in 1 day. And my judge, who was very conservative, he was a George W. Bush appointee named Paul Cassell. We were scared at first because we thought, man, this guy's going to really, make sure I serve the maximum. But what we found out was the opposite. After I was convicted, he actually expressed concern about the long sentence. He was like, this is just marijuana. He's never been in jail before. I have a murder on my docket that I can sentence to no more than 17 years. A child rapist can only get a maximum of 11 years, and I have to give you a minimum of 55. It's ridiculous. And so he looked for a way out. He reached out to the jury, who recommended way lower sentences. He reached out to Congress. He reached out to the president. And at the end of the day, he felt like his hands were tied due to, Congress's mandating these sentences and leaving judges with little discretion. And so, he had no choice but to sentence me to 55 years. But as he sentenced me, it was the first time in history a federal judge had done this. He asked the president to commute my sentence. Like his next, literally after he said, I sentenced you 55 years, he said, I therefore call on the president to commute this sentence to something that's more in line with a just punishment. And Bush would never commute my sentence. I sat in prison for 13 years. After Obama was elected, we felt like there was some hope that, maybe I would get released. And, we built a coalition which consisted of, celebrities like Bonnie Raitt, Alicia Keys, Snoop Dogg, with political figures like Cory Booker, Mike Lee, Rand Paul, Patrick Leahy. And, it took 13 years to get me out. But one factor I need to mention is there was a young prosecutor in the office that prosecuted me who didn't agree with the way my case was handled. His name was Mike Lee. And when he was elected to the Senate in 2010, he remembered my case. He remembered what my judge said. And he was committed to changing that law to, make sure I got some justice. And he reached out to my family. They met up and, he wrote a letter to President Obama, urging my immediate release. My judge wrote an additional letter stating that I would have been free at that time had he had the discretion. I think he said he would have given me anywhere between 8 and 10 years, not near 55. And so,
Right.
Right after my judge wrote that letter, we had a celebrity endorsed letter. Mike Lee, the Koch brothers even picked up my cause and were meeting with the White House. There was a lot of pressure, on my case to release me. And President Obama had changed some charging policies that if they were in effect at that time, I wouldn't have got charged in a similar fashion. I probably would have served maybe, 8 years, maybe at the most. I'm talking max. I probably would have did 3.5 in all likelihood and been out. And so, there were some events that occurred. I don't know exactly who ordered it, but my prosecutor had a change of heart. And I believe, according to Mike Lee, that someone from the White House, or probably the president, had reached out and wanted to basically, find a resolution to my case to release me. And I was released on May 31st, 2016.
And that's a long time. That's a lot of president terms to be sitting in jail. And
yeah, both of Bush's and the first, most of Obama's.
right. And the whole time you're sitting in there, a lot of people think of the Shawshank in the movie versions of going to court and this process being really quick. But, you're sitting in there, and after one shot gets turned down, you're not just waiting a week, a month, a year, you're waiting a president's term. What does that feel like when you're in that situation? How lonely does it get?
I mean, it's pretty bad. I mean, I had hope because I had appeals and I had a lot of people support me. I had 163 former federal judges, former federal prosecutors, former U.S. attorneys general, including Janet Reno. They were fighting my appeals with me. And so, that left me with some hope. And my judges, he wrote a 65-page opinion decrying the punishment, saying this is ridiculous. But I was in such a conservative circuit that, it fell on deaf ears. They looked at it like, judges shouldn't be talking about this. They should just follow the law and be done with it. The higher courts didn't agree with the way Cassell, my judge, approached the case. And so basically they wrote an opinion that was effectively sending him a message not to be doing this. So he resigned from the bench and fought for my release, as a normal citizen, as a law professor. And, it took all those people and all those years to finally get me out. It took a lot of pressure because my case became political. They wanted to use me as like, see what happens when you don't take a plea offer. See what happens when you do this. You'll end up like him. They wanted to basically send a message to people like me. But what happened is the message backfired and it resulted in a change in the law. Because after I got out, I began working with the Trump White House. I began working with, Mike Lee, Cory Booker, and we passed the first federal bipartisan criminal justice reform since 1970. And they basically used my case as the reason why we need reform. Senator Lee and Booker and Orrin Hatch and Leahy all used my case on the Senate floor as an example why we need to pass this legislation. And so, the prosecutors pushed so far that they ended up getting the opposite effect. They changed the law, against them, because they pushed so hard in this case for such, minor conduct. Had I been a bank robber or someone who was like, cartel level, no one would have been sympathetic and the sentence would have been sustained. So, I think, it was a blessing at the same time. I had to probably, suffer so other people wouldn't, because I'm seeing every day people coming home who were in my shoes. Just last Monday here in Utah, Judge Tina Campbell, who was the judge that signed my release, released someone who had the same charges as me, 55-year sentence, because of the law that I helped pass and that my story, inspired. Because of that, he's free. and he only served 10.5 years. And I'm seeing it happen all around the country.
Right. And that's
But
got to be a really satisfying feeling now that you are out to be able to help these other prisoners. And, you had a happy ending after 13 years,
13
but there've been
terrible
a lot of
19 years.
strikeouts in between, and again, the time waited, and after getting shut down and heading back to the prison cell, were there any times that you wanted to give up, that you felt that this wasn't going to work out the way you thought it was?
Absolutely. When President Obama was he did his clemency program, I qualified, and he said he let out a criteria, and I completely qualified. There was someone at the prison I was at who had the same charges as me, everything exactly the same, and he got it this one Christmas when Obama did 100 commutations, and my name wasn't on that list. And this was after a year of every 3 months getting passed up. And so, and I think I became a victim to my own, fame, because, I became the poster child of REEForm. And so there's some people that were like, if we let him out, it's going to kill the momentum to change the law. And so I think they kind of held on to me a little longer so they could work on, showing my story to members of Congress to change their hearts and minds on REEForm. And so, after that Christmas batch that came out, and I saw people at my institution get it, and their cases were not even as compelling as mine, and they had the similar charges, I lost hope. And then the next one, 3 months later in March, came out, and same thing. I wasn't on it, and I was ready to give up. And I called my attorney, and he was like, well, I got some good news. And so basically he told me that, he thinks they're going to let me out, but it was a different route. I didn't get an actual letter from the president commuting my sentence. I got out a different way, and it was successful. I didn't know when I was coming home. I was just told to roll up one day, and I thought I was being transferred, and they threw clothes at me and asked for a phone number. And it was like, wow.
What was that feeling like? Is that moment hit?
It was the most amazing feeling in the world when I stepped outside, a free man after 13 years, never seeing, the free world. Was crazy. And it was amazing. I couldn't sleep for like a week. I'd be up till like midnight and wake up at 3:30. It was crazy.
My fear of getting put in that position, especially for as long as you were, is to come out and not be the same person. While you spent time in probably one of the toughest prisons in the country for inevitably 3 ounces of weed. So you're surrounded by murderers, gang members, rapists. How did you survive 13 years of that?
It was tough. I really, really had to focus, because a lot of people in there didn't survive because they either broke down or they succumbed to prison politics, and they just joined, and they just became a part of the system. And, I wasn't willing to do that, because I knew that I had one shot at getting out. And if I messed it up, I'd be sitting in there for 55 years. And so, I buried myself in the law library and, just studying law, becoming a jailhouse lawyer. I helped get other people out of jail. I was winning cases, and I was stuck in prison. And I felt like after I understood the law better, I felt like had I been my own lawyer in my initial appeals, I probably would have been free, because, I had discovered new evidence that the government hid from me that would have, resulted in a new trial. I found out so much about the law and just how everything works. And I was just disgusted at what I learned about the system. And so, but I did get hope when I seen President Obama changing policies, changing laws and everything. And so, I just stuck with that. And I had my judge's opinion to keep me and my family hopeful. We felt like, at the end of the day, if I don't get out on any appeals, I got my judge's opinion. Somebody's going to listen eventually, whether it's President Obama, the next president, or Congress, like how we got the law changed. So I felt like eventually I was going to come home. I wasn't going to do the whole 55, but at the same time, I don't want to lose out on all my family. I don't want to see my kids. I don't want to get out. My kids are, 25 years old with family, so, and that almost happened. My sons are now in their early 20s, but, that when I got out, they were, teenagers. And I missed them growing up. I missed all that. And so, and it's not like I can get out now and just start a new family because I'm older now. So, they took that from me. And so I don't want to see them take it from anyone else. And so that's why I'm fighting hard, and I'm fighting for people every day. I'm actually writing legal briefs every day for people stuck in prison, people who are facing death from COVID-19. I'm working on their, motions, clemency petitions. I mean, it's pretty much what I'm pretty much and effectively a lawyer for these people. And, my organization, like, so when we passed the First Step Act, I've been to the White House multiple times. They invited us to the celebration at the White House. And when everyone was all happy, celebrating, I remembered my friend who I was in prison with that was in there for a legal dispensary. His name's Luke Scarmazzo. He was operating a medical dispensary under state law. And was he perfectly following state law to the T? No, nobody was. But the feds went after him because they had made a rap video titled "Fuck the Feds." And I'm like, that was stupid, but he ended up getting indicted, and he got 22 years for following state law. I mean, he was following to the T as far as like prescriptions and everything. Maybe he wasn't paying himself, how much a nonprofit's supposed to do it, but little things like that. And I was able to help get his co-defendant out. There's two individuals, they both got 22 years. I wrote their petitions before I got out of prison. And when I got out, I advocated for them to President Obama, and Obama got granted one of them and the other one they denied. And so he's in prison now, and we're in court saying that, in light of today's standards and today the national trend, on marijuana is, moving away from prohibition and into regulation, that in light of those factors and the fact that California is recreational, today he would no longer be prosecuted, that the judge should release him after 12 years.
Well, it sounds like, instead of playing the prison politics, joining the gangs, it was those POWs, again, prisoners of the weed war, that you joined up with in there, and it sounded like it helped a lot. There's quite a few that are probably still in there that you're helping today, and I guess what I'm trying to say is I have a lot of admiration for somebody like you, because it would be really easy to get out and walk away from this situation and hold a grudge and go live your life, that you deservingly deserve too. But no, you're still in the fight. And when you should have been celebrating, you were thinking about your POWs that were still in there. And there's a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what, inspired me to launch a nonprofit. I have my own nonprofit called the Weldon Project, and I wanted to dedicate something purely to those in there for cannabis, because they're the most deserving category of offender. After the First Step Act passed, I realized like this helps a lot of people, but if you're in there for a purely cannabis case, like my friend Luke, it doesn't help you. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. There should have been a provision in there that benefited them specifically, and there wasn't. And so I launched an initiative called Mission Green, which basically brings together the cannabis industry and the entertainment industry to help, raise awareness about those serving federal prison sentences for cannabis. And so, with my connections in the entertainment industry and, my connections in the cannabis industry, I've brought them together, and, we work directly with the White House. And, I delivered a letter to the president in February. I went to the White House and I gave him a letter asking the president to start the process of commuting some of these sentences.
That's awesome. Have you been making any headway with that?
I think so. I mean, there's some interest, but like we've had a lot of bad luck. We've had the impeachment that slowed down the reform. And then when that was over, COVID hit us. And so right when I feel like they were getting ready to act, and there was some commutations in February. Once the impeachment was over, we seen a batch of commutations come down. There was one POW in there. It was a female. And so she got out through commutation to the president. And, we sent this letter and said, look, there's plenty more, even more compelling cases, and here's a criteria you can look at to kind of see. We're not talking about cartel. We're not saying people bring in millions of pounds from Mexico. We're talking about, the lower level ones are the ones who either were trying to follow state law or who no longer would be charged today because their states have went legal. Those type of cases we think are the low hanging fruit. And if the president grants these, I think it'll send a message to Congress that we need to change. We need cannabis reform. And I think, that's the message here, that we definitely need some reform. And we're also working on that. My initiative focuses on the freedom of people in there for cannabis, but it also is trying to raise awareness, and change the hearts and minds of the country so we can finally get or end prohibition rather.
Right. And what do you think the chances are? Because this president has kind of been known to be against cannabis in a sense, but mostly the Republican Party. If reelected, do you think there is a chance that we will have federal legalization of?
Absolutely. I mean, the president said that he would sign the States Act. And so, one thing I like about the States Act, a lot of people say the more act is better. Personally, I'm fearful of letting the government regulate cannabis because anything the federal government does, they usually make it worse. And so, just thinking about, all the legalization in the states right now and all the businesses, if the feds come in and they tighten the regulations are more strict, it's going to supersede state law. And so, I fear that if the federal government comes in, that they're going to ruin the industry rather than just stepping out, descheduling it, and let the states decide. That might be the better alternative.
Right.
And he's expressed support for that. Cory Gardner, has been pushing that bill, and the president came out publicly a few times and said, I'm probably going to get behind him. And whether that ends up happening, I don't know. After re-election, it's anyone's guess what he'll decide to do. I know Cory Gardner's up for re-election, and so he's really trying to push, some of these reforms.
Well, and that's good to hear, and it's reassuring too, knowing we have somebody like you with the inside ability to help spread our message. But now that you're out, are you doing any recording? Are you focusing more on your REEForm cannabis brand and Mission Green instead?
Recording as far as music?
Yeah.
I'm not doing much recording right now because I'm focusing on freedom and changing these laws. And like you just noted, after I launched Mission Green, when I speak to these POWs, while we're fighting for the freedom, what else can we do to help? And some of them said, we need money. It's hard to survive in here. Some of the female prisoners have to choose between buying tampons or buying food and hygiene products. So they don't give free tampons to women in prison. They have to buy them. So we decided, and I was already going to launch a brand because, people were, pushing me like, you need to have your own brand. You spent 13 years in there for cannabis. You should be a part of the legal industry. And so as I was launching my brand, I decided I'm going to bring my cause, with me, and I'm going to start a cannabis brand called REEForm Cannabis. And some of the proceeds from this brand is going to go directly to the POWs in prison. It's going to go right to their commissary accounts on a monthly basis for the life of the brand.
That is awesome. And it sounds like you tried to get this launched right at the beginning of Corona too. You're in a few dispensaries now.
Yeah, we were supposed to launch on March 16th. I was going on a tour in California where we go SoCal, Northern Cal, and we had about 40, 50 stores that were going to carry our product. And so when the Corona lockdown happened, most of them pulled back and said, we're going to wait until the lockdown's over before we carry any new brands. And so, we were able to get in like 4 or 5 of them, but it's been really slow. Working with the farm's been slow just because of, the lockdown and all these other problems. And so I'm hoping next month in July, things pick up and I'm trying to go nationwide. I'm trying to be, we're one of those brands that we stand for something. I'm a formerly incarcerated cannabis prisoner. I feel like dispensaries should support our cause. We're not, you don't have to sacrifice quality to support the cause. And we're giving consumers a way to participate in the movement. And they don't have to spend any money. They don't have to donate anything. You just have to choose our brand over another brand. We're going to have high quality product for a reasonable price. The dispensaries don't even have to donate. And by carrying our brand, you are contributing to the cause.
And what kind of products are you going to be offering?
We're starting with just flower products right now. We'll have, jar 8s, and then we'll have single pre-rolls and the 5-pack pre-rolls. But eventually I want to carry, a wide assortment of products, concentrates and everything, edibles.
Right on. What kind of strains are we working with?
Right now we're working with Chem Dog and Wedding Cake.
Nice.
And we just actually acquired the IP of John Sinclair, the father of the modern legalization movement. John Sinclair was the guy that John Lennon from the Beatles wrote the song John Sinclair about. I think he was the first person prosecuted under Prohibition in Michigan. He got 10 years for 2 joints, and he was a music manager for the rock group MC5 in Detroit. And so because of that, John Lennon of the Beatles and Stevie Wonder and all these big musicians back then had rallies, concerts to try to raise awareness to get John Sinclair out of prison. And when they got him out, that started sort of the mainstream movement to legalize cannabis. And so he's a legend. And so, we're happy to be able to, release the John Sinclair pre-roll. And a percentage of the proceeds goes to his foundation.
Well, here at Salt Lake City, like Sinclair, we look at you is a hero as well. And I hear there might be some rumors of this coming to Utah now that we have medical cannabis. Are you working on that?
Yeah, I mean, we have a few people that have reached out to us. I'm definitely interested in bringing REEForm cannabis to Utah. It should be,
Right.
REEForm, the whole story and everything is from Utah, and so I don't
Right.
see there's no reason why we shouldn't be in the stores here, and given that people will be benefiting if there's any cannabis prisoners here in Utah. We could be, and some of the proceeds can go to other causes that affect change in cannabis.
Right. And that that's great things, now that Utah's coming or it's joining the green fight, we'll put it that way.
We'll get full legalization here eventually. It's coming, and I
I
would like to
agree.
jump into that fight and try to make that happen. Obviously, not prematurely, but and I also got an expose documentary coming out that's
Right.
produced by Mark Wahlberg's production company had a hand in it, and NBA Hall of Famer Kevin Garnett is our executive producer, and it's a very very compelling documentary and docu series, and it's got Snoop Dogg in it. It's got the president. It's got Mike Lee, Cory Booker, Charles Koch of the Koch brothers. It's got a lot of other celebrities in it, and it's very, very compelling. A lot of people are going to be disgusted by what they see.
No, I can't wait to watch this. And you're really bringing the heat, we'll put it that way, with Mission Green. And I think it's going to have a lot of impact. And what excites me about bringing this story back to Utah, in a sense, because this is nothing new, but we have a lot of audience that just are not familiar with this story and what you're doing today, and that's so important. Um, since here at Salt Lake City, we do like to medicate. I gotta ask the story about the first time you smoked down after getting released. When was that? Who was it with?
It was at It was right after I got off probation. I was on probation for 18 months, and so it was at South by Southwest with Snoop Dogg.
No kidding. So your first smoke down was with Snoop Dogg, and I assume since you guys were all hanging out, before 2002, do you have any fun stories from back in Southern California hanging out with
Yeah,
Snoop?
I mean, I have a couple of them. I mean, one, I was on tour with Snoop, and we rolled up this joint that was like a foot long with a bunch of zigzags glued together, and we made this big joint, and we were smoking it, and the thing was just falling apart. It was so funny. But we had these two couches, and they were put together with like maybe 6 inches of space together right there. And Snoop was sitting in the middle of it, and he was smoking this big old joint, and he's skinny, so he fell right through the couch and got stuck in the middle of a space like this big. It was funny as hell.
That's hilarious. Um,
Yeah.
you were working with a lot of big name people right before all this went down, and you
Yeah, I
know,
mean, even in the early stages, I was just trying to get in the industry. I was around every big name you can think of, whether or not I was working with them on music or I was just with them learning the industry, probably for pretty much every big name from, the 90s to the early 2000s. And, I signed a lot of individuals. I had an unreleased song with Tupac. We had, I did a whole album with Snoop, and, we had a song with Pink, and we had just a bunch of different, artists and albums coming out. We had a movie coming out with Snoop, and it was just a lot of stuff going on. And so, that is sort of the reason why I did more time than anyone else, because most people in my shoes would get a plea offer of like 5 years or less, and they'd be
right.
out in 3.5. But because, I was who I was, they looked at me like, okay, we want to use him to get our name out there, to get, a lot of them got promotions because there was so much publicity in my case. My prosecutor actually got an award from the executive office of the United States Attorney General, and it said for the successful prosecution of Weldon Angelos on his award.
Who are some of the key figures here in Utah that are still in office? We have elections coming up, and who in particular should we know about right now that
Well,
helped you?
I think most people's gone right now. I know my prosecutor was nominated for a judgeship, but I actually am not opposed to it. I actually support it because he actually at the tail end got me out. He didn't have to. He could have, opposed it. And so he actually supported it at the end, and I made it out in time to see my sons graduate. But I think what the problem with my case started at the local level with the sheriff's office, the Metro Gang Unit. And in particular, there was an officer who's now the police chief of Midvale, who is the one that fabricated police reports. We have both copies. We can show you one original and then the ones that were manipulated to add allegations that were never there. And he got all these promotions. He's now the police chief of Midvale, and he is basically going to be the villain in our documentary. And we're uncovering, what he did to me. And, and I'm not going to say the feds didn't have a part in it, because they turned a blind eye to it and they actually facilitated it. But the people or the person, the individual most responsible was the informant and his handler.
Well, that's important to know, that there's people that are still in office that put you in the position that you were in, which is surprising to me. I'm not a Utah native. I moved out here in 2012. I heard about your story pretty early on, moving to Utah, but I didn't know that there's still people serving that are, the ones that are responsible for putting you in jail.
Yeah, and I don't know if you have to get elected to be a police chief in Midvale or not, but I would definitely vote. I would definitely encourage everyone to vote against this gentleman if that's the case.
Right, and that's interesting. I'm trying to look up the name right now, and I know if he's running for sheriff, we can do something about that. But
yeah,
it's surprising.
Probably happy with police chief, but
it's exciting that your documentary is coming out. And a lot of this will be brought to light. And I know we have a huge audience here in Utah that will be paying attention. And I'm glad we like to recognize the heroes at Salt Lake City, but we also like to recognize the zeros as well. And it sounds like you're doing the same. What else about Mission Green can our audience know? How can they participate to join the good fight here in Utah?
Yeah, I mean, they can go on our website, theweldonproject.org, and, they can sign up to be a volunteer. They can help with fundraising, because, fundraising is important. And actually, what's really sad is, and this speaks loudly about the state of the cannabis industry, is that all these corporations and big companies that are, making millions and millions of dollars, they're really cheap. They don't really care about the cause. They came in once all the people that went to prison and fought all the tough fight to get legalization, and they just jumped in and became millionaires. Same like former members of Congress who were opposing any kind of legalization, who are opposing any kind of guidelines amendments to lower these prison sentences, who fought to keep marijuana illegal, jump right in the industry once they leave Congress, and now they're enriching themselves. And I feel like the industry should boycott anyone from law enforcement who are fighting prohibition, anyone in Congress who is fighting it to keep people in prison for cannabis. The industry should boycott them. There's no way we should have those people making millions after they fought to keep people like myself in prison.
Yeah, it's the definition of hypocrisy right there. And
absolutely. And I think that the companies that hire them, we should boycott those companies.
No.
And, we should start a rally and boycott. Don't buy any of their products. Don't support them until they fire those individuals. Do not let them make money off people's blood, sweat, and tears.
Right. And our Leafly lawyer, J.D. Luritzen, who you're familiar with, we've talked about that extensively on people who should be making money in this industry. And if there's anyone that should be profiting off of this, it's people like you and other POWs. So I want to emphasize to our audience as much as I can, when you make it to Colorado, California, and your brand's starting to pop up in these dispensaries, and you see Tommy Chong, Willie's Reserve, Khalifa Kush, I know if I buy REEForm, I know where that money's going, and I support that cause. And so thank you for setting that up, because there are a lot of people that are making money and their names get hidden behind the logos and the names of the companies, and you really don't know where your money's going. We've been told for years our money is going to the cartels. Well, in a sense, it still is, right?
Yeah, and so and one thing about my brand is that I'm making sure that everything we put out is high quality, because I don't want people to feel like they have to downgrade to buy our brand and support the cause. No, we're gonna provide high quality. We're gonna provide all the different strains once we get there, and to make sure that everyone can participate in this movement, whether it's a dispensary owner or a consumer who just wants to buy some cannabis.
Right. And it's exciting that it can come here to Utah, and our laws are evolving. And did you ever anticipate medical cannabis to be in Utah? Um,
No, I didn't. I remember when it was first being floated around, and I was skeptical. I was hoping that the laws would have stayed. It was the original ballot was pretty expansive. I felt like Utah should allow home grow and other things like that. But I'm just glad we took some baby steps. But I think full legalization needs to come here, and I think the governor and the legislature should not basically interfere with that if that's what the citizens want.
right. And it's obvious that that's what the citizens want. And we did get a revised Proposition 2 law, but the fact of the matter is there's a legal medical cannabis dispensary just blocks away from the federal court that sent you away to jail for 13 years. And in my opinion, that's progress, right? But we still need to progress. And that's why it's so important people like you are still fighting the fight, because a lot of people think because they can walk into a dispensary and buy legal weed, all right, we're good to go. But there's so much work to be done. And that's why I can't thank you enough for being on and spreading your message. And hopefully that's going to propel our audience to get in the fight. And we get asked all the time, how can we participate? What can I do?
We can bring REEForm to Utah. That's how they can participate. Every patient that purchases it, they're going to be contributing to someone who's sitting in a prison cell for doing the same thing, and for their right to purchase cannabis. Like my friend Luke, his story's been used all over the country to justify legalization, and so he should be benefiting from the legal industry. And so this is a way, where everyone can get involved, and the dispensaries, they don't lose any money. The consumer doesn't lose any money. They just purchase product. We're the one losing the money. We're the one taking portions of our profit and giving it to these individuals.
Right. And, I think things are going to change. They are changing here. And you brought it up here in Utah. We're taking baby steps, but, they're in the right direction at least. Weldon, I can't begin to thank you enough for being on Salt Bait Q&A today. Your story, it's so important, and it's great that we can share it so people in our audience can find a way that they can help too, join the good fight, so to speak. So Green Scene, go check out theweldonproject.org or visit reefercannabis.com to see the new cannabis brand that might be coming to Utah soon. Me and Snoop shoot, we in the coop, we interlude, we in root. Nigga, we in hot pursuit, we in